My billionaire ex-husband brought his new bride to flaunt their power couple marriage until I arrived holding his hidden prenup. That prenup you had mysteriously lost, Mason? I found the original. My words sliced through the elegant chatter of the charity gala. Mason Reed's face drains of color, champagne glass frozen mid-toast. Turns out your former legal counsel kept a copy, including that special little clause about intellectual property. His new wife's perfect smile falters as whispers ripple through the crowd of Silicon Valley elites surrounding us. Abby, this isn't the place. Mason's voice holds a warning that once would have intimidated me. Really? I think it's the perfect place. I unfold the document with deliberate slowness. You stole my life's work, told everyone I was just the supportive wife, then replaced me with a more suitable partner for your billionaire image. Sophia steps forward, her couture gown catching the light. Mason, what is she talking about? Nothing, darling. Abby's always had a flair for drama. His billion-dollar smile doesn't waver, but I see the panic in his eyes. Actually, Sophia, I'm talking about how your husband built his empire on my stolen technology. Page 17 explains it all. I tap the document. See, Mason always told me to keep backups of everything important. Ironic that he forgot to follow his own advice. Have you ever watched someone's carefully constructed world begin to crumble? Ever held in your hands the one thing that could expose the lies they've built their empire on? Ever wondered if revenge is really as sweet as they say? This is the story of how I lost everything, found the truth, and learned that the most valuable contract isn't the one on paper, it's the one you make with yourself. If you believe in standing up for what's rightfully yours, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. Trust me, what happens next shocked everyone in that ballroom, including me. 3 weeks earlier. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, its thick cream envelope stamped with the gold-embossed logo of the Reed Foundation. I almost threw it away unopened. 3 years after my divorce from Mason Reed, anything bearing his name still triggered a potent mixture of heartache and anger. Another bill? Asked Rachel, my best friend and law partner, leaning against my office doorframe with coffee in hand. Worse, an invitation. I slid my letter opener under the flap and extracted the heavy cardstock inside. The Reed Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Mason must be cleaning out old mailing lists. Rachel set her coffee down and plucked the invitation from my fingers. The social event of the season. Everyone who's anyone in tech will be there. Her eyes met mine over the gilded edge, including Mason and his new wife, I'd imagine. Sophia Brooks Reed. Tech's power couple, according to Forbes. I tried to keep the bitterness from my voice. I think I'll pass. Wait, isn't this the event you used to plan? Before my husband decided I wasn't good enough for his billionaire lifestyle? Yes. Rachel studied me with the shrewd gaze that made her such a formidable attorney. At 34, she was the same age as me. But her journey hadn't included the public humiliation of having a tech mogul husband leave her for a model. You should go, she said finally. I laughed. Right. Show up alone to watch Mason parade around with his perfect new wife at an event I used to organize. Hard pass. Not alone. With me. Rachel's smile turned mischievous. You've spent 3 years rebuilding your life, Abby. You're one of the most respected intellectual property attorneys in California now. Why not remind them all that you're not just Mason Reed's ex-wife anymore? I stared at the invitation, at Mason's signature printed beneath the formal text. 3 years ago, my world had imploded when I discovered my husband, the man I'd helped build a tech empire from nothing, was having an affair with Sophia Brooks, international model and social media darling. The divorce that followed was swift, brutal, and excruciatingly public. I don't know if I'm ready to face him yet. If not now, when? Rachel perched on the edge of my desk. Besides, I hear rumors about trouble in paradise. Apparently, America's favorite power couple might not be as perfect as they appear on magazine covers. I forced myself to look away from the invitation. That's not my concern anymore. Of course not. But wouldn't it be satisfying to show up looking fabulous while his new marriage crumbles? Before I could respond, my assistant knocked on the open door. Miss Morgan, there's a call for you on line 2. He says it's urgent, and you'll want to take it. Who is it? David Foster. He says you'll know who he is. The name sent a jolt through me. David Foster had been Mason's lead counsel during our divorce. A brilliant, but ruthless attorney who had helped Mason retain full rights to NeuroSync, the revolutionary AI interface we developed together. I'll take it. I waited for my assistant to leave before picking up the phone. "This is Abigail Morgan. Miss Morgan, thank you for taking my call." Foster's voice was tighter than I remembered, missing the smooth confidence that had once made him such an intimidating opponent. "What do you want, David? Our business concluded 3 years ago." "Not entirely." He paused. "I need to meet with you. In person. There's something you should know about your divorce settlement." My fingers tightened on the receiver. If this is some kind of trick. No trick. I no longer represent Mason Reed. There was something in his voice, bitterness, perhaps regret. "I have information that could change everything for you. Information about NeuroSync." My pulse quickened. NeuroSync was the neural interface technology I'd conceptualized during my graduate studies, technology that Mason had claimed as his own during our divorce, technology that had subsequently made him billions. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow?" "The Blue Cup Cafe on Market Street, 2 p.m. I hesitated, suspicion warring with curiosity. "Why now? After 3 years? Let's just say my conscience finally outweighs my fear of breach of confidentiality lawsuits." He lowered his voice. "Mason Reed isn't who everyone thinks he is, and you deserve to know the truth." After hanging up, I sat frozen, staring at the Reed Foundation invitation still on my desk. Something about the timing felt significant, David Foster reaching out just as this invitation arrived. As if the universe were conspiring to pull me back into Mason's orbit after I'd spent 3 years carefully extracting myself from it. "Everything okay?" Rachel had returned, concern etching her features. "I don't know." I told her about Foster's call. "It could be a trap," she said immediately. "Mason might be using him to get information about your current cases." Foster said he no longer represents Mason. "And you believe him?" I considered this. "I'm not sure, but I'm curious enough to find out what he wants." Rachel nodded. "I'll go with you, just in case." "No, I made my decision. I need to do this alone. But if I'm not back by 4 tomorrow, send the cavalry." The next day, I arrived at the Blue Cup Cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance and my back to the wall, habits I developed during the contentious months of my divorce. The cafe was quiet, just a few students with laptops and a couple of business people having late lunches. David Foster arrived precisely at 2 p.m. He looked older than I remembered, his once immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, the confident swagger replaced by a cautious gait. He spotted me immediately, nodding in acknowledgement as he approached my table. "Miss Morgan, thank you for meeting me. I'm here. Talk." I didn't offer to shake his hand. He sat down, placing a leather portfolio on the table between us. "I understand your hostility. I wouldn't trust me either, in your position. You spent 6 months helping my husband strip me of everything I'd worked for. Hostility is putting it mildly." Foster had the grace to look uncomfortable. I was doing my job, but there are lines I shouldn't have crossed, such as... He unzipped the portfolio and extracted a manila envelope. 3 months ago, I was fired from Harrison and Walsh. Strategic downsizing, they called it. After 12 years as a partner. I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't. It was a blessing in disguise. It gave me time to reflect on certain cases, certain ethical compromises. He slid the envelope across the table, including yours. I didn't touch it. "What is this?" "A prenuptial agreement. Yours and Mason's." "We never signed a prenup." "No, you didn't." Foster's expression was grim, but one was drafted. "Mason instructed me to prepare it before your wedding, then told me you'd refuse to sign it. I recently discovered that wasn't true. He never presented it to you at all." Frowning, I opened the envelope and scanned the first page. It was indeed a prenuptial agreement, dated 2 weeks before my wedding to Mason, with both our names listed. Why would he have a prenup drafted and then not use it? Turn to page 17. I flipped through the document, stopping at the indicated page. As I read, my blood ran cold. Any intellectual property, technical innovations, or creative works developed during the marriage shall remain the sole property of Mason Reed, regardless of the contributing party. I looked up, rage building inside me. What the hell is this? It's proof that Mason knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want you to see this clause before the wedding, but he wanted it documented somewhere in case he needed it later. I don't understand. But I was beginning to. Foster leaned forward. "Mason knew your background in neural interface technology. He saw your potential before you even finished your PhD. The prenup was his insurance policy, If things didn't work out between you, he could still claim ownership of anything you developed together. That's insane. No court would enforce an unsigned prenup. No, but it demonstrates intent. And combined with these, he pulled a USB drive from his pocket. It tells a very different story than the one Mason presented during your divorce. What's on the drive? Emails, meeting notes, early development logs for NeuroSync. Foster's eyes met mine. Evidence that you were the primary creator, not Mason. That he deliberately misrepresented your contribution to claim sole ownership. I sat back, trying to process what I was hearing. NeuroSync had been my passion project during graduate school. A neural interface system that could translate thought patterns into digital commands. I'd shared my research with Mason early in our relationship, and we developed it together during our marriage. But when we divorced, Mason had claimed it was based on proprietary technology his company had been developing before he met me. Why are you giving me this now? Because Mason Reed is about to sell NeuroSync to Global Technologies for $5 billion. Foster's voice was quiet, but intense. And because I helped him steal it from you. I falsified documents during discovery, concealed evidence of your contributions, and misled the court about the timeline of development. I should be disbarred for what I did. Yes, you should. My voice shook with anger. You helped him take everything from me. I know. He looked away. I've made a lot of compromises in my career, justified a lot of ethical shortcuts. But what we did to you, that crosses a line I can no longer live with. I studied him, searching for deception. Why should I believe you now? You shouldn't, but you should look at the evidence. He gestured to the USB drive. Everything you need is there. Emails where Mason explicitly acknowledges you as the creator. Development logs with your signature. The original patent application drafts, showing you as lead inventor before Mason had them altered. My mind was racing, calculating the implications. If this is true, if I can prove NeuroSync was my creation, then you're entitled to a significant portion of that $5 billion. And Mason Reed is facing potential fraud charges. I stared at the prenup and the USB drive, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. This could destroy him. Yes. Foster met my gaze. The question is whether he deserves to be destroyed. An image of Mason flashed in my mind, not the polished tech mogul from magazine covers, but the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. The man who had once supported my dreams before deciding his ambitions were more important than our marriage. What happened to you, David? Why risk your career to help me now? He was quiet for a moment. My wife left me last year. 22 years of marriage, gone because I was too focused on winning cases to notice our relationship dying. He gave a bitter laugh. Turns out helping destroy other people's marriages eventually destroys your own. Who knew? I slipped the prenup and USB drive into my bag. I'll need to verify all of this. Of course, Foster stood. There's one more thing you should know. The Reed Foundation Gala is next Saturday. I received an invitation. Mason is planning to announce the Global Technologies deal there. It's meant to be his crowning achievement, the culmination of his visionary work on NeuroSync. Foster's mouth twisted into a sardonic smile. Might be the perfect place to remind him who the real visionary is. After he left, I sat alone in the cafe, my mind spinning with possibilities. If what Foster had given me was legitimate, I could reclaim what Mason had stolen from me, not just money, but recognition for my work. My creation, but a small voice whispered caution. David Foster was not a trustworthy man. This could be an elaborate trap, a way for Mason to discredit me further. I needed to verify everything before making any moves. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Well? What did Foster want? I stared at her message, trying to figure out how to explain what had just happened. Finally, I typed, he just handed me the keys to Mason's kingdom, and possibly his prison cell. Have you ever had that moment when you suddenly realize you've been lied to for years? When the story you've been told, the story you've been living, turns out to be fiction? If this story resonates with you, hit that like button and share your experiences in the comments. Let me know if you think I should confront Mason at his gala or handle this quietly through legal channels. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn. I needed privacy to examine Foster's evidence without curious eyes. If this was legitimate, it would change everything, not just for me, but for Mason and his company. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and began sifting through the files. There were hundreds of them: emails, development logs, patent applications, meeting minutes, a comprehensive record of NeuroSync's creation and evolution. And there it was, in black and white, proof that I had been the driving force behind the technology. Emails where Mason explicitly referred to NeuroSync as Abby's project and Abby's breakthrough. Development logs with my signature on every major advance. The original patent application with my name listed as primary inventor, later amended to remove me entirely. Most damning of all were emails between Mason and Foster discussing strategies to minimize Abby's contribution and secure full rights to the technology in case of divorce. Emails dated 6 months before I discovered Mason's affair with Sophia. He had been planning to leave me and take NeuroSync with him for half a year before I found out about his infidelity. "You're here early." Rachel's voice startled me. She stood in my doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Found something interesting?" I gestured to my screen. "You could say that." For the next hour, I walked Rachel through Foster's evidence. Her expression grew increasingly outraged as she realized the extent of Mason's deception. "This is unbelievable," she said finally. "He planned the whole thing. The affair, the divorce, stealing your technology. All of it. And Foster helped him do it. Then had an attack of conscience 3 years later. Convenient timing, with the global technologies deal about to happen." Rachel frowned. "Are you sure this isn't some kind of setup? I've checked the email headers, the document metadata. Everything appears authentic. But I want to be absolutely certain before we make any moves. We should hire a digital forensics expert. And we need to subpoena the original server records to verify these weren't fabricated." I nodded, staring at Mason's face on my computer screen. A photo from the early days of NeuroSync development, his arm around my shoulders as we celebrated our first successful trial. We looked so happy, so in love. Had it all been calculation on his part? Had he seen me as nothing more than a stepping stone to the fortune he now possessed? "If this is real," Rachel said, interrupting my thoughts, "what do you want to do about it?" I closed the photo, unable to look at it anymore. "I want what's mine, my share of NeuroSync, my name on the technology I created, and a very public acknowledgement that Mason Reed built his empire on stolen ideas. That's going to be a messy legal battle. Mason won't go down without a fight. I'm counting on it." I turned to her with a determined smile. "Which is why I'm going to that gala. I want to see his face when he realizes I know everything." "Are you sure that's wise?" Confronting him publicly could backfire. "Maybe, but I've spent 3 years being the victim in everyone's eyes. Poor Abby, discarded for a younger model when Mason got rich and famous." My voice hardened. It's time they knew the truth. All of it. Rachel studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but we do this smart. We get all our evidence verified and legal strategy in place before you confront him. If you're going to war with a billionaire, you need to be armed with more than righteous anger." "Agreed. And you're going to need a killer dress." She grinned. "Something that says, 'I'm about to take back everything you stole from me, you bastard.'" For the first time since receiving Foster's call, I laughed. "I think I know just the one." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. We hired a digital forensics expert who confirmed the authenticity of Foster's evidence. We consulted with corporate litigation specialists who outlined our options for claiming my share of NeuroSync. We built a case so airtight that even Mason's army of lawyers would have trouble poking holes in it. And through it all, I found myself remembering the good and the bad, the beginning and the end. How had we gone from partners to enemies? When had Mason decided that his ambition was more important than our love? Perhaps the signs had been there from the start. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I met Mason Reed when I was 26, a brilliant but socially awkward PhD candidate, with more comfort around neural mapping algorithms than people. He was 29, a charismatic entrepreneur with a string of modest tech successes and boundless confidence in his future. We met at a tech conference in San Francisco. I was presenting my research on neural interfaces, and he was the only person who stayed after my presentation to ask insightful questions. "Your work could revolutionize how humans interact with technology," he told me over coffee afterward. "But you need someone who understands how to bring it to market. Is that someone you?" I asked, immediately charmed by his directness. His smile had been dazzling. "It could be. I've been looking for the next big thing, and I think you might be it." I should have noticed how he framed it. He wasn't interested in my research for its own sake, but for its market potential. But I was too flattered by his attention, too captivated by his vision of what we could accomplish together. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Mason was relentless when he wanted something, and apparently, he wanted me. Within 6 months, we were living together. By 8 months, we were engaged. At 1 year, we were married in a small ceremony attended by my academic colleagues and his business associates. "We're going to change the world together," he whispered during our first dance as husband and wife. "Your brilliance and my business sense were unstoppable." And for a while, it seemed true. I finished my PhD, and we immediately began working on making my theoretical framework for neural interfaces a reality. Mason secured initial funding, set up a proper lab, and hired a small team of engineers to support our work. NeuroSync was born in our spare bedroom, with me coding late into the night while Mason crafted business plans and pitched to investors. It was the happiest time of my life, working side by side with the man I loved, watching our shared dream take shape. The breakthrough came 2 years into our marriage. After countless failed attempts, I finally developed an algorithm that could reliably translate specific thought patterns into digital commands. It wasn't mind-reading, exactly, but it could detect when a user was thinking, select, or move, or accept with remarkable accuracy. "Abby, this is it," Mason said, his eyes wide with excitement as he tested the interface. "This is the foundation of everything we've been working toward." We celebrated that night with champagne and dreams of the future. Mason talked about applications, gaming, accessibility technology for people with disabilities, enhanced reality interfaces. The possibilities were endless. "We need to patent this immediately," he said. "This algorithm is the key to everything." I agreed, trusting him to handle the business side while I continued refining the technology. That was our partnership. I invented, he implemented. I created, he commercialized. The next 3 years were a blur of progress and expansion. NeuroSync evolved from a clunky prototype to an elegant system. Our company grew from the 2 of us to 50 employees. Investors began taking serious interest as early trials showed promising results. And somewhere in that process, things between Mason and me began to change. It started subtly. In meetings, he began referring to NeuroSync as my technology instead of our technology. In press releases, I was mentioned as part of the engineering team rather than co-founder and lead inventor. In public appearances, I was increasingly sidelined as Mason became the face of the company. "It's just business, Abby," he would say when I raised concerns. "Investors respond better to a single visionary leader. You hate public speaking anyway." Which was true. I was more comfortable in the lab than in the spotlight. So I let it go, focusing on the work itself rather than who got credit for it. The real shift happened when NeuroSync caught the attention of major tech companies. Suddenly, Mason was being featured in business magazines, invited to exclusive industry events, mentioned as a rising star in Silicon Valley. And with that attention came new social circles, wealthy investors, industry influencers, celebrities interested in tech. People like Sophia Brooks, the internationally famous model who had recently reinvented herself as a tech enthusiast and social media entrepreneur. She met Mason at a TechCrunch party I had skipped to finish debugging a new feature. 2 weeks later, she was at our office, supposedly exploring partnership opportunities between her fashion tech startup and NeuroSync. I didn't see the danger at first. Sophia was beautiful, yes, but she seemed more interested in our technology than in my husband. She asked intelligent questions, offered interesting perspectives on user experience, and treated me with genuine respect. "Your work is incredible," she told me during a demonstration. "You've created something that could change how people interact with the digital world." I was flattered, especially since most of Mason's new business associates tended to speak past me to him, as if I were merely an adjunct to his vision rather than its creator. But looking back, I should have noticed how Mason changed when Sophia was around, more animated, more polished, more concerned with appearances. How meetings with her always seemed to run long. How often her name appeared in his calendar. I was too busy with a major update to the NeuroSync core algorithm to pay attention to the warning signs. Too trusting, too naive. The truth came in the form of a misdirected text message. I picked up Mason's phone when mine was charging, intending to order dinner for us after a long day at the lab. The notification appeared just as I unlocked his screen, a message from Sophia with a photo attached. "Missing you. Last night was amazing. Can't wait for Paris next week." The photo was Sophia, in lingerie, in what appeared to be a hotel room. My world collapsed in an instant. 6 years of marriage, of partnership, of building something revolutionary together, all suddenly called into question. I confronted Mason that night when he returned home, later than usual, and smelling of unfamiliar perfume. "How long?" I asked, his phone on the table between us, the message still displayed. He didn't deny it, didn't even look particularly shocked that I'd discovered his secret. "A few months." Months. The betrayal was like a physical pain in my chest. While we've been working 18-hour days on the Miller contract, while I've been sleeping in the lab some nights to meet deadlines, it just happened, Abby. His voice was calm, reasonable, the same tone he used when explaining complex business strategies. "Sophia and I connect on a different level. She understands the world I'm moving in now." "The world you're moving in?" I repeated, incredulous. "What about our world? The one we built together?" "That's the problem." Mason sighed, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "We're growing in different directions. You're still the same lab-focused researcher I met 6 years ago. I'm running a company that's about to go global. A company built on my technology." "Our technology," he corrected smoothly. "And yes, your contributions have been valuable. But NeuroSync has evolved beyond your original concept. It's a commercial enterprise now, not just a research project." I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "Are you leaving me for her?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. "I think we should take some time apart, figure out what we both want." "I know what I want," I said, my voice breaking. "I want the man I married, the one who believed in partnership and shared dreams." "People change, Abby. I've outgrown what we had." "You mean you've outgrown me?" He didn't deny it, and in that silence, I heard everything I needed to know. 2 weeks later, I received divorce papers. Mason had moved out, supposedly to give me space, though tabloid photos soon revealed he was living in Sophia's downtown penthouse. I was hurt but not yet worried about NeuroSync. We were co-founders, partners. Surely the technology we'd created together would remain a shared asset? How wrong I was. The first hint of trouble came when I was locked out of the company's servers. Then my company email stopped working. When I called Mason, he was apologetic but firm. "It's a temporary security measure while we sort out the separation. Standard protocol when executives leave the company." "Leave the company?" "I didn't leave. I co-founded it. The board feels it's best if you step back during this transition, to avoid conflicts of interest." "What board?" "We're the board, Mason." Another uncomfortable pause. "Actually, we restructured last month. During the Series C funding, you signed the papers." I remembered the stack of documents he'd had me sign during a particularly hectic week. Documents he'd assured me were routine equity adjustments to accommodate new investors. "This is insane. You can't just push me out of my own company. Our lawyers will be in touch about a fair settlement. You'll be taken care of, Abby." But I wasn't interested in being taken care of. I wanted what was rightfully mine: recognition for my work, my place in the company I'd helped build, my stake in the technology I'd created. I hired a lawyer, not a divorce attorney, but a specialist in intellectual property and corporate law. Rachel Brooks had a reputation for being brilliant, tenacious, and unafraid of going up against powerful opponents. "He's trying to cut you out completely," she said after reviewing my case. "Based on these corporate restructuring documents, he's positioned himself as the primary inventor and controlling stakeholder. Your ownership has been diluted to less than 5%. That can't be legal. I created the core technology. My name is on the original patents." Rachel's expression was grim. "That's the problem. I can't find your name on any of the patent applications. According to USPTO records, Mason Reed is listed as the primary inventor, with several staff engineers as co-contributors. You're not mentioned at all. That's impossible. I signed those applications myself. Then we need to find the originals, because the versions on file tell a very different story." What followed was 6 months of legal warfare. Mason's team, led by David Foster, fought us at every turn. Documents mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses from the early days of NeuroSync suddenly couldn't remember my contributions. Former colleagues avoided my calls, afraid of jeopardizing their positions in what had become one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing companies. The narrative Mason constructed was devastatingly effective. I was the supportive wife who had contributed some early ideas, but the real breakthroughs had been his. I was trying to claim credit for his genius because I was bitter about our divorce. I was unstable, vindictive, delusional about my role in the company's success. And without documentation to prove otherwise, It was his word against mine. The final blow came during a deposition when Foster produced emails I had supposedly written, acknowledging Mason as the true creator of NeuroSync's core technology. I don't recognize these, I told Rachel during a break. I never wrote them. They look authentic. The metadata checks out. They're forgeries. They have to be. But we couldn't prove it. Not with Mason controlling all the company's servers and email archives. In the end, I settled. Not because I wanted to, but because I was emotionally exhausted, financially drained, and increasingly isolated. The settlement gave me a one-time payment of $5 million, a fortune to most people, but a pittance compared to what NeuroSync was worth, and required me to sign a non-disclosure agreement about my involvement with the company. Mason got everything else: full ownership of NeuroSync, exclusive rights to all its patents and intellectual property, and the public recognition as its visionary creator. 3 years later, $5 million had paid for my new law degree, funded the startup costs from my partnership with Rachel, and left enough for a comfortable, but not extravagant lifestyle. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of my marriage, establishing myself as an intellectual property attorney, specializing in protecting inventors and creators from corporate exploitation. There was a certain poetic justice in it, using my experience of being robbed of my creation to help others protect theirs. But the wound of losing NeuroSync never fully healed. Every time I saw Mason on the cover of a magazine, every time NeuroSync announced a new breakthrough, every time the company's valuation increased, I felt the loss anew. And now, with Foster's evidence in hand, I finally had the chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked the night before the gala. We were in my apartment, reviewing our strategy one last time. "Once you confront Mason publicly, there's no going back." "I'm sure." I looked at the dress hanging on my closet door, midnight blue, elegant but commanding, a far cry from the functional attire I'd preferred during my marriage. He took everything from me and made me doubt myself in the process. I want him to know that I know the truth. I want him to feel exposed, vulnerable, the way I felt when he betrayed me. And Sophia? She'll be collateral damage. I considered this. Sophia Brooks had been the other woman, yes, but had she known what Mason was really doing? Had she understood that he was systematically erasing me from my own creation? If she's complicit, she deserves what's coming. If she's another of Mason's victims, she deserves to know the truth. Rachel nodded, satisfied with my answer. "Then let's make sure you're completely prepared. Mason will try to discredit you, dismiss you, make you look emotional or unstable. He's been doing that for years. I'm immune now." "Good." She raised her wine glass in a toast. "To justice, and to the look on Mason Reed's face when he realizes his perfect life is built on quicksand." I clinked my glass against hers. "To justice." That night, I dreamed of the early days, Mason and me working side by side, sharing ideas, building something revolutionary together. In the dream, he looked at me the way he used to, with admiration and love, before ambition corrupted him. I woke with tears on my cheeks and a renewed determination in my heart. Today, I would reclaim my legacy. Today, the truth would finally come out. The Reed Foundation annual charity gala was held at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, its striking architecture providing a dramatic backdrop for the city's elite to display their wealth and influence under the guise of philanthropy. I arrived fashionably late, giving Mason and Sophia plenty of time to establish their presence before my entrance disrupted their carefully choreographed evening. Rachel had arranged for a photographer friend to capture the moment I walked in, not just for posterity, but as potential evidence if Mason tried to have me removed. Nothing said consciousness of guilt like having your ex-wife forcibly ejected from a public charity event. The museum's atrium buzzed with conversation and laughter, the air heavy with expensive perfume and the unmistakable scent of money and power. I paused at the entrance, surveying the crowd. Silicon Valley's finest were out in force: tech CEOs, venture capitalists, social media influencers, all dressed in their evening best and pretending they cared about the foundation's mission of digital literacy for underprivileged communities. A mission I had created and championed during my marriage to Mason, inspired by my own childhood in a rural town with limited technology access. Another idea he had appropriated as his own after our divorce. "Miss Morgan?" A young event staffer approached with a tablet. "I don't see your name on our guest list." "Check under Morgan Reed," I said smoothly. My invitation was addressed that way. The staffer scrolled through her list, frowning. "I don't see. Is there a problem?" The voice belonged to Elizabeth Chen, the Foundation's executive director and an old friend who had always been kind to me, even after the divorce. Elizabeth. I smiled warmly. It's wonderful to see you. Abby. What a lovely surprise. She embraced me, then turned to the staffer. Miss Morgan is always welcome at our events. She helped establish the Foundation's core programs. Of course. My apologies, Miss Morgan. As the staffer retreated, Elizabeth linked her arm through mine. I didn't know you were coming. Mason will be. She hesitated, searching for the diplomatic term. Shocked, horrified, legally concerned? I suggested. Elizabeth's eyebrow arched. I was going to say surprised, but your options are more interesting. She studied me with newfound curiosity. You're up to something. Just reconnecting with old friends, supporting a cause I believe in. She clearly didn't believe me, but was too polite to say so. Well, you've picked an interesting night for a reunion. Mason's making a major announcement about NeuroSync later this evening. So I heard. The Global Technologies acquisition? Elizabeth's surprise was evident. How did you know about that? It's been kept completely under wraps. I smiled enigmatically. I have my sources. Before she could press further, a commotion near the central staircase drew our attention. Mason and Sophia had made their entrance, and as always, they commanded the room effortlessly. Mason in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, Sophia in a couture gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover, and indeed, a photographer was already capturing their arrival for what would undoubtedly be tomorrow's society page lead. America's tech power couple, the brilliant innovator and his gorgeous, socially conscious wife. I felt a familiar twist in my stomach, part anger, part grief for what I'd lost. But tonight, it was tempered by the knowledge in my clutch, the prenup, a flash drive with key evidence, and the power to destroy the carefully constructed image Mason had built on the foundation of my work. I should circulate, I told Elizabeth. But let's catch up later. She squeezed my arm. Be careful. Abby. Whatever you're planning, just be careful. I made my way through the crowd, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and noting the reactions as people recognized me. Some looked away uncomfortably, others stared openly, clearly wondering what Mason's ex-wife was doing at his foundation's gala. A few, those who had known me before the divorce, offered genuine smiles or quiet greetings. I positioned myself where I could observe Mason without being immediately visible to him. He was in his element, moving from group to group with Sophia at his side, his smile dazzling as he accepted congratulations and fielded questions about rumors of a major announcement. He hasn't seen you yet. Rachel had materialized beside me, elegant in a burgundy gown. But half the room is waiting for the moment he does. Let them wait a little longer. I sipped my champagne. I want him comfortable, confident. It'll make the fall more dramatic. You're terrifying sometimes. I love it. Rachel surveyed the crowd. Foster is here, by the way, near the bar, looking nervous. I glanced in that direction and spotted David Foster, clutching a whiskey and scanning the room with anxious eyes. When our gazes met, he gave a slight nod before quickly looking away. Good. I want him to witness this. Your moment approaches. Mason's working his way toward us. 30 seconds, max. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. This was it. The confrontation I'd been preparing for since Foster had handed me the evidence of Mason's betrayal. Remember, Rachel murmured, no matter what he says, you have the truth on your side. And me as a witness. Thanks for having my back. Always. I turned just as Mason spotted me, his perfect smile faltering for just a moment before he recovered. Beside him, Sophia looked confused, then recognition dawned in her eyes as she realized who I was. Abby, Mason said, his voice carrying just the right note of surprised pleasure. I didn't realize you were coming. I wouldn't miss it, I replied, matching his false warmth. The Foundation's work is too important. It's nice that you still support our mission. Your mission? I raised an eyebrow. I believe I was the one who created the Digital Literacy Initiative, along with so many other things you've claimed as your own. A flash of unease crossed his face, quickly masked. You always did have wonderful ideas. How have you been? I hear you're practicing law now. Intellectual property law, specifically. Helping creators protect what's rightfully theirs from people who would steal it. The double meaning wasn't lost on him. His jaw tightened slightly, though his smile remained in place. How appropriate. Sophia stepped forward, her smile perfect, but her eyes wary. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Sophia Brooks Reed. I know who you are. I extended my hand. Abigail Morgan, the woman whose life's work made your husband a billionaire. Her hand froze halfway to mine, her perfect features faltering. Excuse me? Abby's just being dramatic, Mason said quickly, his hand possessively claiming Sophia's waist. She always had a tendency to exaggerate her contributions. Exaggerate? I reached into my clutch and removed the folded prenuptial agreement. Like how you exaggerated being the creator of NeuroSync. The technology Global Technologies is about to pay $5 billion for? Mason's composure slipped, his eyes darting to the document in my hand. This isn't the place for this conversation. I disagree. I think it's exactly the place. I kept my voice measured, aware of the curious onlookers pretending not to eavesdrop. Your public image is built on lies, Mason. Might as well dismantle it in public too. Mason, what is she talking about? Sophia asked, confusion evident in her voice. Nothing important, just old grievances. He turned to his wife with practiced ease. Darling, why don't you check on the presentation arrangements? I need a moment with Abby. Sophia hesitated, clearly torn between social propriety and genuine concern. Are you sure? Positive. I'll join you shortly. He kissed her cheek, the picture of the devoted husband. As she reluctantly moved away, I saw Rachel step in smoothly to intercept her. Good. I wanted Sophia distracted while I dealt with Mason. What the hell do you think you're doing? Mason hissed once Sophia was out of earshot, his pleasant facade evaporating. You signed an NDA. You can't discuss NeuroSync or your involvement with it. Funny thing about NDAs, they're not enforceable when they're used to conceal fraud. I tapped the folded prenup against my palm. And fraud is exactly what you committed, Mason. Fraud, intellectual property theft, perjury during our divorce proceedings. His eyes narrowed, calculating. You're bluffing. You have nothing. I have everything. I lowered my voice. Emails proving I was the primary inventor. Development logs with my name on them. The original patent applications before you altered them. And this? I held up the prenup. Evidence that you planned to steal my work from the beginning. The color drained from Mason's face as realization dawned. Foster, he whispered, that vindictive bastard. He found his conscience. Unlike you. Mason glanced around, suddenly aware of the interested gazes fixed on our exchange. We need to discuss this privately. No, we don't. I'm done with private discussions where you manipulate the narrative. I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. You stole my life's work, Mason. You erased me from my own creation, built your fame and fortune on my innovation, and left me with nothing but a settlement that was a fraction of what I deserved. I built NeuroSync into what it is today, he countered, his voice low and intense. Your initial concept would have languished in academic obscurity without me. That may be true, but it doesn't give you the right to claim sole credit. It doesn't justify what you did. For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened. What do you want, Abby? Money? Recognition? Your name in the press release when the global deal is announced? I want everything I'm owed. Half of NeuroSync's value, that's $2.5 billion. Full recognition as co-creator and lead inventor, and a public acknowledgement from you that you deliberately misrepresented my contribution. He laughed, though there was no humor in it. You're delusional. No court would award you that after all this time. Want to bet? I smiled coldly. I have David Foster ready to testify about how he helped you falsify documents during our divorce. I have forensic evidence proving those emails were fabricated. I have enough to send you to prison for fraud, Mason. A flash of genuine fear crossed his face before he regained control. You're forgetting something important, Abby. What's that? If you destroy me, you destroy NeuroSync too. The technology you claim to care so much about. The one that's helping paralyzed people communicate. The one that's revolutionizing treatment for neurological disorders. It all goes down with me. Is that what you want? To burn down everything we built because your ego can't handle sharing credit? The accusation stung, partly because there was a kernel of truth in it. NeuroSync had evolved beyond my original vision, achieving medical breakthroughs I'd never anticipated. Did I have the right to jeopardize that progress for my own vindication? But then I remembered the nights I'd spent coding that initial algorithm, the breakthrough moment when the interface first responded to my thoughts, the exhilaration of creating something revolutionary, and how Mason had systematically erased me from that history. Nice try. But NeuroSync will survive without you. In fact, it might thrive with ethical leadership for a change. Mason's jaw tightened as he realized manipulation wouldn't work. You can't prove anything. It's been 3 years, Abby. Evidence disappears, memories fade, witnesses change stories. Not this time. I unfolded the prenup, turning to page 17, the intellectual property clause. Read it, then tell me this wasn't premeditated theft. He scanned the page, his expression darkening. This proves nothing. It's an unsigned draft that was never executed. It proves intent. It shows you were planning to claim ownership of my ideas before we even married. I reclaimed the document. But it's just one piece of the puzzle. Foster gave me everything, Mason. Every email, every falsified document, every conversation where you plotted to cut me out. The silence between us crackled with tension. Around us, the gala continued, but I could feel the curious glances, sense the whispers starting to circulate. I'll see you in court, Mason said finally, his voice cold. Looking forward to it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. But first, I'm going to enjoy watching you try to make your big announcement tonight with this hanging over your head. Will you still look like the brilliant visionary when everyone's wondering if you stole your breakthrough technology from your ex-wife? Before he could respond, a chiming sound indicated the evening's program was about to begin. Mason's time was up. He was expected on stage for his big moment. His triumph suddenly transformed into potential disaster. You're making a mistake, Abby, he said quietly. One you'll regret. The only mistake I made was trusting you. I raised my champagne glass in mock toast. Break a leg up there, darling. I'll be watching. As Mason walked away, his shoulders rigid with tension, Rachel rejoined me. Well, how did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. Denial, threats, manipulation, the Mason Reed special. Sophia cornered me, Rachel said, keeping her voice low. She had a lot of questions about your history with Mason and NeuroSync. What did you tell her? Just enough to make her doubt everything her husband has told her. She's smarter than I expected. I watched as Sophia rejoined Mason near the stage, whispering urgently in his ear. His face remained impassive, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight shake of his head as he dismissed whatever concern she was raising. The foundation's chairman approached the microphone, calling for everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your generous support of the Reed Foundation and our mission to bring digital literacy to underserved communities worldwide. It is now my pleasure to introduce our founder, the visionary creator of NeuroSync technology, Mason Reed. The applause was enthusiastic as Mason took the stage, his public persona firmly in place despite the confrontation we just had. Sophia stood at the edge of the stage, her smile perfect but her eyes troubled as they occasionally darted to where I stood. Thank you, Mason began, his voice confident and charismatic. When I founded the Reed Foundation 3 years ago, I had a vision of using technology to empower those without access, to bridge the digital divide that threatens to leave so many behind in our rapidly evolving world. I nearly laughed aloud at his revisionist history. The foundation had been my idea, born from my own childhood experiences with limited technology access. But like everything else, Mason had claimed it as his own after our divorce. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce a new chapter in that mission, he continued. As many of you may have heard, NeuroSync Technologies has entered into a historic partnership with Global Technologies, bringing our revolutionary neural interface to an even wider market and accelerating our research into medical applications. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. This was the announcement everyone had been waiting for, the $5 billion deal that would cement Mason's place in tech history. This partnership represents not just a business opportunity, but a chance to expand the positive impact of the technology I've dedicated my life to developing. I felt a surge of anger at his continued use of I instead of we. Even now, knowing I had evidence of his fraud, he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge my contribution. The journey to this moment hasn't always been easy, Mason continued, his gaze briefly finding mine in the crowd. Innovation requires sacrifice, perseverance, and sometimes difficult choices. But I stand before you tonight proud of what we've accomplished and excited about the future. There it was, a small concession. What we've accomplished. But without context, everyone would assume he meant his current team, not his ex-wife whose ideas had launched his empire. As part of this new chapter, I'm pleased to announce that the Reed Foundation will be establishing a $20 million scholarship program for women in STEM fields, encouraging the next generation of innovators to follow their dreams, regardless of gender or background. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, unaware of the cynical calculation behind the announcement. Mason was trying to inoculate himself against my accusations, positioning himself as a champion of women in technology, even as he continued to erase my contribution to his success. Before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge someone special, someone whose support and partnership has been invaluable on this journey. For a wild moment, I thought he might actually recognize me. But of course not. My incredible wife, Sophia, whose vision and compassion continue to inspire me every day. Sophia joined him on stage, accepting his outstretched hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Something had changed in her demeanor, a subtle withdrawal, a new wariness as she stood beside her husband. I watched the rest of Mason's speech with growing determination. His carefully crafted image, the brilliant inventor, the philanthropic billionaire, the devoted husband, was nothing but an elaborate facade. And I finally had the power to expose the truth. As the formal presentation concluded and the gala shifted back to mingling and fundraising, I felt a presence at my elbow. Turning, I found myself face to face with Sophia Brooks Reed. "Miss Morgan," she said, her voice cool but not hostile. "I think we need to talk." "I agree," I replied, surprised by her directness. "But not here." She nodded, understanding the need for privacy. "There's a small gallery on the third floor that's closed for the evening. No one will disturb us there." I glanced at Rachel, who gave me a subtle nod indicating she'd keep an eye on Mason. Then I followed Sophia to a service elevator and up to the museum's third floor. The gallery was dark except for security lighting, the contemporary sculptures casting dramatic shadows across the polished floor. Sophia moved with the confidence of someone familiar with the space, leading me to a small seating area in the corner. "I know who you are," she said without preamble. "I've known since the beginning of my relationship with Mason." "And what exactly did he tell you about me?" "That you were his first wife. That you had contributed some early concepts to NeuroSync but couldn't handle the pressure of commercialization. That you'd had a breakdown during the divorce and made wild claims about your role in the company." She met my eyes directly. "He portrayed you as unstable, bitter, unable to accept that your marriage had failed. And you believed him." "I had no reason not to." Mason can be very convincing. A hint of bitterness crept into her voice. "But I've learned to question his version of events, especially when they portray him as the flawless hero of every story." I studied her with new interest. This wasn't the vapid social climber I'd expected. What changed? Little things at first. Inconsistencies in his stories, his extreme reaction whenever your name was mentioned, the way he'd shut down conversations about the early days of NeuroSync. She smoothed her gown, a nervous gesture at odds with her composed demeanor. And then last month, I found documents in his home office, emails he'd printed out years ago and forgotten to destroy. Emails that contradicted everything he'd told me about NeuroSync's origins. What kind of emails? Messages between Mason and David Foster, discussing how to handle the Abby problem during your divorce. Strategizing ways to remove your name from patents and development records. She looked up, her expression troubled. When I confronted him, Mason claimed they were taken out of context, that Foster had misunderstood his intentions. But it made me start digging deeper. I hadn't expected this, hadn't considered that Sophia might have her own suspicions about Mason's integrity. "What did you find?" "Enough to make me question everything about my marriage." She twisted her wedding ring absently. "The prenup Mason had me sign contains the same intellectual property clause you showed him tonight. Word for word." A cold realization settled over me. He's doing it again. Setting up the same theft. The same erasure. I believe so, yes. Sophia's admission was calm but laced with pain. "I've been developing a neural interface for fashion technology, a way to control design software through thought patterns. It builds on NeuroSync's foundation, but applies it to creative fields. And Mason is positioning himself to claim ownership if your marriage ends." "Exactly." She met my gaze directly. "Which is why I want to help you." I hadn't seen this coming, an alliance with the woman who had replaced me in Mason's life. "Why would you help me?" "Self-preservation, partly. If Mason could do this to you, he could do it to me." Her expression hardened. "But also because it's the right thing to do." No one deserves to have their work stolen, their contribution erased. Even if exposing Mason might damage your own reputation, the media won't be kind when this story breaks. I'll survive. A hint of steel entered her voice. I was famous before I met Mason Reed. I'll be fine after he's gone. I considered her offer carefully. Having Sophia on my side would add credibility to my claims, potentially sway public opinion in my favor. But could I trust her? Was this another of Mason's manipulations, using his wife to gather intelligence about my plans? What exactly are you offering? I asked. Information. Access to Mason's home office, which contains documents he'd never keep at the company, and my public support when you make your claims official. She leaned forward. I'm not just a pretty face on his arm, Miss Morgan. I have resources of my own, connections Mason doesn't know about. Call me Abby, I said, making my decision. And I think we have a deal. We were interrupted by the sound of the elevator arriving on our floor. A moment later, Mason emerged, his expression thunderous as he spotted us together. What the hell is this? He demanded, striding toward us. Sophia, I've been looking everywhere for you. Mason. Sophia's voice was cool, her transformation from supportive wife to adversary complete. Abby and I were just getting acquainted. Properly this time. Whatever she's told you, it's not what it seems. Mason's gaze darted between us, calculating, assessing the threat. Abby has harbored resentment for years. She's trying to manipulate you. Strange, Sophia replied. That's exactly what you said she'd do. Almost like you were preparing me to dismiss anything she might tell me. She stood, smoothing her gown. We should get back to the gala. People will be wondering where we've gone. Mason grabbed her arm as she moved to pass him. What did she tell you? Sophia looked pointedly at his hand until he released her. Nothing I hadn't already suspected. But your reaction just now tells me everything I need to know. As she walked toward the elevator, Mason turned to me, his expression darkening. What have you done? Nothing yet, I replied, rising to follow Sophia. But I'm just getting started. The gala continued for another hour, but the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Word of my confrontation with Mason had spread through the crowd, creating a buzz of speculation and sideways glances. Mason attempted to maintain his composure, continuing to schmooze with investors and accept congratulations on the global technologies deal, but I could see the strain in his smile, the tension in his shoulders. Sophia remained by his side, the perfect wife in public. But something fundamental had changed between them, a distance, a coolness that hadn't been there before. And occasionally, her gaze would find mine across the room, a silent confirmation of our alliance. By the time I left the museum, I felt simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. The first battle had been fought, not in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. And based on the whispers following me out the door, the verdict was far from settled. That, Rachel said as we climbed into her car, was the most entertaining charity gala I've ever attended. And I once watched two venture capitalists get into a fistfight over the last foie gras canapé. I laughed, tension draining from my shoulders. Did you see Mason's face when he found Sophia and me together? I thought he was going to have a stroke. Speaking of Sophia, Rachel pulled away from the curb, heading toward my apartment. Do you trust her? Not entirely, but I believe she has her own reasons for turning against Mason. And right now, that's enough. I stared out the window at the city lights, processing the evening's events. We've drawn first blood, but the real battle is just beginning. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications before I'd even had my first cup of coffee. News of my confrontation with Mason had leaked, likely through multiple sources. Given the number of witnesses, and technology journalists were scrambling to piece together the story. The headlines ranged from cautious, questions raised about neurosync origins, to sensational, text-power couple rocked by ex-wife's claims of intellectual theft. My social media accounts were flooded with friend requests and messages from reporters seeking comment. I ignored them all, following the strategy Rachel and I had developed. Let the speculation build. Let Mason twist in the wind of public opinion while we prepared our legal case. The more desperate he became, the more likely he was to make mistakes. My phone rang as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. Have you seen TechCrunch? She asked without preamble. Not yet. What am I missing? Global Technologies has temporarily paused the acquisition process pending an investigation into ownership claims surrounding NeuroSync's core technology. I nearly dropped my mug. Already? That's faster than we expected. They're not taking any chances. $5 billion is too much to risk on potentially stolen intellectual property. There was a smile in Rachel's voice. Mason must be having a meltdown. Has he made any public statements? A brief one through NeuroSync's PR team. They're calling your claims baseless allegations from a disgruntled former employee and expressing confidence that the global technologies deal will proceed once the facts are clarified. Former employee, I repeated, incredulous. Not even acknowledging that I was his wife, let alone co-founder. It's a strategy. By reducing your role to employee, he's trying to diminish your credibility. It won't work. Not with the evidence we have, no. Rachel paused. Speaking of which, we've got a meeting with Judge Wilson this afternoon. He's agreed to review our request for expedited discovery. That's a good sign. He's not easily impressed. Your reputation helps. Being the attorney who took down QuantumSoft for stealing their developers' code last year gave you credibility. Rachel's tone turned serious. But Mason won't go down without a fight, Abby. His entire identity is built on being NeuroSync's creator. He'll use every resource, every connection to maintain that narrative. Let him try. The truth is on our side. Truth doesn't always win in court, Rachel reminded me. But in this case, I think it just might. After hanging up, I checked my email to find a message from an unfamiliar address, with the subject line, insurance policy. Opening it, I discovered it was from Sophia, sent from a private account Mason wouldn't know about. The message was brief. Found these in Mason's personal safe. Thought you might want copies before they mysteriously disappear. Good luck today. S. Attached were scans of several documents, early NeuroSync development notes with my handwriting all over them, a preliminary patent application listing me as primary inventor, and most damning of all, a personal journal entry where Mason had written, Abby's neural interface concept is revolutionary. If we can develop it successfully, it will transform the company and make us millions. I need to make sure the legal structure protects my control. You can't risk her walking away with the technology if things go south between us. The entry was dated 2 months before our wedding. I forwarded the email to Rachel with the note. Our case just got stronger. Sophia came through. Her reply was immediate. Holy shit, Mason is toast. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, you know the unique pain of realizing your trust was misplaced. The moment when hindsight suddenly reveals all the red flags you missed, all the warnings you ignored. Share your experiences in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who took credit for your work? What gave you the strength to fight back? Judge Wilson was a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for intelligence and impartiality. At 68, she had seen every type of corporate malfeasance imaginable during her 3 decades on the bench, which made her unimpressed by wealth, status, or public relations spin. Let me be clear, she said after reviewing our initial filing, these are serious allegations against a prominent business figure. I need to be convinced there's sufficient merit to justify expedited discovery. Rachel and I had prepared extensively for this hearing. We knew Mason would have sent his best legal team, and indeed, across the courtroom sat Harrison Walsh himself, founding partner of the prestigious firm that bore his name, accompanied by 3 associates and Mason Reed. Your Honor, I began. We understand the gravity of our claims. That's why we've prepared a preliminary evidence package demonstrating both the merit of our case and the urgency of expedited proceedings. I submitted our carefully curated exhibits, Foster's evidence, Sophia's documents, and a detailed timeline showing Mason's systematic erasure of my contributions to NeuroSync. Judge Wilson reviewed them with a neutral expression that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Harrison Walsh rose to object. Your Honor, these materials are deeply misleading, taken out of context, and potentially fabricated. Miss Morgan signed comprehensive settlement agreements during her divorce from Mr. Reed, including explicit acknowledgement that she had no ownership claim to NeuroSync Technologies. Agreements obtained through fraud are not enforceable. I countered. Our evidence shows that Mr. Reed and his counsel knowingly falsified documents, fabricated emails, and misled the court during divorce proceedings to secure those settlements. Judge Wilson held up a hand to stop the brewing argument. Mr. Walsh, these allegations are troubling. What is your client's response to claims that these emails, she held up one of our exhibits, were fabricated to diminish Miss Morgan's role in NeuroSync's development? Walsh looked uncomfortable. We categorically deny any document falsification, Your Honor. The emails in question were provided during normal discovery in the divorce proceedings. If they contain inaccuracies, that would be due to Miss Morgan's own record keeping, not any action by my client. And what about this? Judge Wilson held up Sophia's contribution. Mason's journal entry. This appears to be in Mr. Reed's handwriting, expressing clear intent to structure legal protections that would prevent Miss Morgan from claiming rights to technology she developed. Mason leaned forward to whisper urgently to Walsh, his face tight with barely contained anger. I could guess what he was saying. How did they get that? That was in my personal safe. Your Honor, Walsh said carefully, without the opportunity to examine the original document, we cannot confirm its authenticity. This could easily be fabricated. The original is in Mr. Reed's possession, Rachel interjected smoothly. We'd be happy to have it examined by a handwriting expert as part of discovery. Judge Wilson studied Mason over her reading glasses, her expression revealing nothing. Then she turned her attention back to the documents before her. I've seen enough to justify expedited discovery, she announced finally. Mr. Reed's company is in the process of a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that hinges on clear ownership of the intellectual property in question. If Miss S. Morgan's claims have merit, delaying discovery could cause irreparable harm to all parties involved, including Global Technologies and NeuroSync shareholders. Walsh attempted to protest, but Judge Wilson silenced him with a raised hand. My decision is made, Counselor. You'll have 30 days to produce all requested documents related to NeuroSync's development, original patent applications, and communications regarding Miss M.S. Morgan's role in the company. Additionally, I'm ordering preservation of all electronic records from the period in question, and I mean all records, including personal devices and accounts. She looked directly at Mason as she emphasized the last point. Any evidence of document destruction or tampering will be viewed most unfavorably by this court. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor, Walsh replied, his professional demeanor intact despite the significant setback. Mason's expression, however, was thunderous. As we rose at the judge's departure, his eyes met mine across the courtroom, filled with cold fury and something else, fear, perhaps, or the dawning realization that he might actually lose. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-profile case. Rachel and I had prepared for this, knowing that the public relations battle would be fought alongside the legal one. Miss Morgan, can you comment on your claims against NeuroSync? Is it true you're seeking billions in damages from your ex-husband? How do you respond to NeuroSync's statement calling your allegations baseless? I paused on the courthouse steps, composing myself before turning to face the cameras. This would set the tone for how my case was perceived by the public. I needed to appear confident but not vindictive, professional but still human enough to earn sympathy. 3 years ago, the neural interface technology I created was taken from me through systematic fraud and misrepresentation, I began. Today is the first step toward correcting that injustice. I'm not just fighting for myself, but for every innovator who has had their work stolen, their contribution erased. Are you trying to block the Global Technologies acquisition? A reporter called out. Not at all. I believe NeuroSync technology has tremendous potential to help people worldwide. I simply want the truth acknowledged and appropriate credit and compensation given to the technology's original creator. I paused for effect. Me. Mr. Reed claims you're motivated by bitterness over your divorce. How do you respond? A perfect opening. If I were motivated by personal feelings, I would have brought this case years ago. I'm bringing it now because NeuroSync is about to be sold for $5 billion based on technology I created. This isn't about emotions, it's about justice, fair compensation, and the truth. As we moved to leave, a final question cut through the noise. Miss Morgan, is it true that Sophia Brooks Reed is supporting your claims against her husband? I turned back with a smile. I think you should ask Miss Brooks Reed that question directly. Back in our office, Rachel and I debriefed on the hearing while monitoring the initial media coverage. Most outlets were taking a cautious approach, presenting both sides while emphasizing the potential impact on the Global Technologies deal. But the narrative was beginning to shift. No longer was I just Mason Reed's bitter ex-wife. Now I was NeuroSync's potential uncredited creator, a much more sympathetic position. We've got him on the defensive, Rachel observed, scanning a tech blog's analysis of the situation. Global Technologies has appointed an independent review committee to examine ownership claims before proceeding with the acquisition. That's a major victory already. It's just the beginning. I stared at my computer screen, where Mason's corporate headshot gazed confidently back at me from a news article. He'll fight dirty. You know that, right? I'm counting on it. Rachel's smile was predatory. The dirtier he fights, the more desperate he looks. And desperation leads to mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mason just came home in a rage. Destroying papers in his office. I'm recording everything. I showed Rachel the message. Still think she might be playing us? Less likely now. She's putting herself at risk. Rachel considered this development. We should get her somewhere safe before Mason realizes she's working against him. Agreed. I'll talk to her about protective options. Before I could text Sophia back, my phone rang with an unknown number. Warily, I answered. Abigail Morgan. Miss Morgan, this is Tyler Bennett from Global Technologies. The voice was crisp, professional, the kind that belonged to high-level executives. I was hoping we might arrange a meeting to discuss your claims regarding neurosync technology. I glanced at Rachel, mouthing Global Tech, as I switched to speakerphone. I'd be happy to meet, Mr. Bennett. May I ask in what capacity you're reaching out? I lead Global's acquisition team. Given the complications that have arisen, we're conducting our own investigation separate from the legal proceedings. We'd like to hear your perspective directly. I understand. When would you like to meet? Would tomorrow morning be possible? Say, 9 a.m. at our San Francisco offices. After confirming the details, I hung up and turned to Rachel. What do you think? Trap or opportunity? Both, probably. She leaned back in her chair, considering the implications. Global has 5 billion reasons to get to the bottom of this quickly. If your claims have merit, they'll want to know before they complete the acquisition. Or they're doing Mason's bidding, trying to get me to make statements they can use against me. Either way, we go together. And we bring evidence, not everything, but enough to show they're buying stolen technology. Rachel's expression turned thoughtful. This could actually work in our favor. If Global believes your claims, they might pressure Mason to settle rather than risk losing the deal entirely. That night, I dreamed of the early days again, Mason and me in our first small office, celebrating when our prototype successfully responded to a thought command for the first time. In the dream, Mason looked at me with genuine pride and love, lifting me off my feet in an exuberant hug. You did it, Abby. You actually did it. I woke with tears on my cheeks, mourning not just the relationship I'd lost, but the partnership that had once seemed so perfect, so full of promise. What had changed him? Had the man I married been real at all, or just another calculated performance from someone who saw people as merely tools to advance his ambitions? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. In person, no lawyers. Meet me at Ocean Beach, North End, 6 a.m. M. Mason, reaching out directly. It was a violation of proper legal protocol. Parties in litigation shouldn't communicate without their attorneys present. But curiosity won out over caution. What could be so urgent that he'd risk improper contact? I arrived at Ocean Beach just as dawn was breaking over San Francisco. The morning was cool and foggy, the beach nearly deserted except for a few early joggers and dog walkers. Mason stood near the water's edge, hands in the pockets of his expensive coat, looking out at the gray Pacific. He'd aged in the 3 years since our divorce, subtle changes that only someone who had once known him intimately would notice. New lines around his eyes, a slight softening of his once sharp jawline, a weariness that hadn't been there before. You came. He didn't turn as I approached, somehow sensing my presence. I was curious. This violates about 6 different protocols, you know? I know. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. But some conversations need to happen outside the legal framework. What do you want, Mason? To understand why now? His gaze was intense, searching. You've had this information for how long? Weeks? Months? Why wait until the global deal was about to close? Why not bring your case sooner? I only received Foster's evidence recently, but you've always known the truth about neurosync. You could have fought harder during the divorce, pursued different legal strategies. I didn't have the resources then, or the evidence. I studied him, trying to decipher his angle. Why does the timing matter to you? Because it feels targeted, designed to cause maximum damage to the global acquisition. A muscle twitched in his jaw. If this is about money, Abby, we can reach an agreement. A substantial payment, acknowledgement of your contribution, whatever it takes to remove the cloud from the acquisition. You think I can be bought off? I laughed without humor. After what you did to me, I think everyone has a price. He turned to face me fully. Name yours. For a moment, I was tempted, not by the money, but by the simplicity of it. Take a settlement, walk away, avoid the months of legal battles and public scrutiny ahead. But then I remembered the systematic way he had erased me from my own creation. The calculated theft of my life's work. The gaslighting that had made me doubt my own value, my own memories. My price is the truth, Mason. Full public acknowledgement that NeuroSync was my creation. That you deliberately stole it and erased my contribution. My name restored to all patents and company materials as primary inventor and co-founder. His expression hardened. You know I can't do that. It would destroy everything I've built. You mean everything you stole? I stepped closer, anger rising. Why did you do it, Mason? We were partners. We could have built NeuroSync together, shared the credit, the success. Why did you have to take it all? Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or just calculation. It wasn't personal, Abby. Not personal? I stared at him in disbelief. You stole my life's work, my identity as an innovator. You made me doubt myself, my worth, my memories. How is that not personal? It was business. His voice was flat, emotionless. NeuroSync needed a single visionary leader to attract the right investors, the right partners. The market responds to individual genius, not collaborative teams. So, you sacrificed our marriage, my career, for better PR? I made a strategic decision for the company's success. He looked away. The technology has helped millions of people, Abby. Would that have happened if we'd stayed a small, husband-wife operation? We'll never know, will we? Because you never gave us that chance. The rising sun broke through the fog, casting long shadows across the beach. Mason's face was half illuminated, half in darkness. A fitting metaphor for the man himself. I'm meeting with Global Technologies this morning. I told him. I'm going to show them proof that they're buying stolen technology. That the brilliant innovator they think they're acquiring is a fraud who built his empire on someone else's ideas. They won't care, Mason said, but uncertainty tinged his voice. As long as the patents are legally held by NeuroSync, the acquisition will proceed. Perhaps. But the reputational damage might force them to renegotiate. Maybe demand that you step away from the company entirely. I smiled without warmth. How would that feel, Mason? To lose control of the company you stole from me? His expression darkened. You're playing a dangerous game, Abby. I have resources you can't imagine, connections in places that could make your life very difficult. Is that a threat? A reality check? You're not just taking on me. You're taking on a multi-billion-dollar company with shareholders, board members, and partners who all have vested interests in maintaining the status quo. Then they shouldn't have built their investments on stolen intellectual property. I turned to leave, then paused. One last question, Mason. Was any of it real? Us, I mean. Did you ever actually love me, or was I just a convenient source of innovative ideas? For a moment, vulnerability cracked his polished facade. It was real, Abby. In the beginning, before everything got so big, so complicated. He looked away. I did love you. That wasn't a lie. Just everything else, then? I nodded, more to myself than to him. Goodbye, Mason. I'll see you in court. As I walked away, leaving him standing alone on the beach, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and determination. The man I had loved was gone, perhaps had never truly existed, but the woman I had become was stronger than the one he had betrayed, more capable of fighting for what was rightfully hers. The Global Technologies offices occupied the top floors of a gleaming tower in San Francisco's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and bay, a subtle reminder of the company's dominant position in the tech landscape. Tyler Bennett met us in the reception area personally, a courtesy that suggested our meeting held significant importance. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps early 40s, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to making billion-dollar decisions. Miss Morgan, Miss Brooks, thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, his smile professional but reserved. We have a conference room prepared. Several members of our acquisition team and legal department will be joining us. If that's acceptable, Rachel answered for us. That's fine, Mr. Bennett. We came prepared to share our concerns about the NeuroSync acquisition with all relevant parties. The conference room was already occupied by 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, all with the polished, alert appearance of high-level corporate executives. Introductions revealed a mix of legal counsel, technical analysts, and acquisition specialists. Global's A team for evaluating potential problems with the deal. Let me be direct, Bennett began once we were seated. Your lawsuit raises serious concerns about the intellectual property we're preparing to acquire. Before proceeding further with NeuroSync, we need to understand the validity of your claims. I appreciate your directness, I replied. So I'll be equally direct. NeuroSync technology was my creation. I developed the core neural interface algorithm during my doctoral research and refined it during my marriage to Mason Reed. When our marriage ended, he systematically erased my contribution and claimed sole credit for the technology. One of the lawyers leaned forward. Miss Morgan, these are serious allegations. What evidence supports your claim to be NeuroSync's creator? Rachel and I had prepared extensively for this question. For the next hour, we presented a carefully curated selection of our evidence. Early development logs with my signature, emails acknowledging my primary role, the original patent drafts listing me as lead inventor, and testimony from former colleagues willing to confirm my contributions. The global team listened attentively, occasionally asking probing questions that revealed their technical sophistication and legal acumen. They were taking this seriously, very seriously. Have you presented this evidence to NeuroSync's board? Asked one of the technical analysts. Not yet, Rachel answered. Our legal strategy involves building our complete case before engaging with the board directly. However, Mr. Reed is fully aware of our claims and evidence. Bennett exchanged glances with his colleagues, some unspoken communication passing between them. Miss Morgan, if your claims are validated, what outcome are you seeking? Do you want to block the acquisition entirely? Not necessarily. I want recognition as NeuroSync's primary creator, restoration of my name to all patents and company materials, and fair compensation for the value my work has generated, which would be a significant percentage of the acquisition price. And if those terms were met, you would support the acquisition proceeding? Yes, I've never wanted to destroy NeuroSync. It's my creation. After all, I want it to succeed and continue helping people. I just want the truth acknowledged and my contribution properly valued. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. That's helpful to know. The meeting concluded with polite but non-committal statements from the global team about continuing their investigation and possibly arranging follow-up discussions. But as Rachel and I prepared to leave, Bennett pulled me aside. Off the record, Miss Morgan, your evidence is compelling. More compelling than Mason Reed's denials. His voice was low, meant only for my ears. If what you've shown us is authentic, Global cannot proceed with the acquisition under the current terms. The intellectual property risks would be unacceptable to our shareholders. It's authentic. And there's more we haven't shown you yet. He nodded, his expression grave. I believe you. Which puts us all in a difficult position. $5 billion, thousands of jobs, and potentially life-changing technology hanging in the balance. The technology will survive regardless of who owns it, I assured him. My issue isn't with NeuroSync itself, but with the man who stole it from me. I understand. Bennett glanced toward his colleagues, then back to me. We'll be in touch, soon. As Rachel and I left the building, I felt cautiously optimistic. Global Technologies clearly took our claims seriously, serious enough that they might pressure Mason toward a settlement rather than risk the acquisition collapsing entirely. That went well, Rachel commented as we reached the street. Bennett practically told you they believe your case has merit. But they're still business people. They'll look for the path of least resistance to completing the acquisition, which might be pushing Mason out and negotiating directly with you. She grinned. Wouldn't that be poetic justice? Mason forced to watch from the sidelines as you closed the biggest deal in NeuroSync's history? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mason knows I've been helping you. Situation escalating. Need to meet as soon as possible. The triumph I'd felt after the global meeting evaporated, replaced by concern. Sophia's in trouble. Mason found out she's been working with us. That complicates things. If he retaliates against her, it could actually strengthen our case, shows consciousness of guilt, but puts her at risk in the meantime. I texted Sophia back, arranging to meet at a small cafe near our office. Legal strategy aside, I don't want her hurt because she helped us. Agreed. We should offer her our spare office as temporary workspace if she needs somewhere safe to go during business hours. When Sophia arrived at the cafe 30 minutes later, the change in her was striking. The polished, confident woman from the gala had been replaced by someone visibly stressed, her designer outfit and perfect makeup unable to conceal the tension in her posture, the wariness in her eyes. Mason had the house swept for recording devices this morning, she said without preamble, as she joined us. He found the camera I'd placed in his office. When I got home from a meeting, he was waiting for me. Furious. Did he threaten you? Rachel asked, her voice sharp with concern. Not physically. But he made it clear he knows I've been helping you. Called me a traitor, said I'd regret betraying him. Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass in front of her. He's cutting off my access to joint accounts, talking about annulment rather than divorce, trying to trigger the penalty clauses in our prenup. I felt a surge of guilt. I'm sorry we've put you in this position. You didn't. I chose to help because it was right. She met my gaze directly. And because I recognized the pattern. What he did to you, he's already starting to do to me. Taking credit for my work, positioning himself to claim ownership of my fashion tech interface. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Rachel asked. My sister's place in Marin. Mason doesn't know about it. I bought it for her through a separate LLC. Sophia's smile was grim. I learned to protect my assets long before I met Mason Reed. 15 years in the modeling industry teaches you to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Smart, I acknowledged, seeing her in a new light. This woman wasn't just a trophy wife. She was a survivor, a strategist, someone who had navigated difficult waters long before Mason entered her life. What happens now? Sophia asked. Mason is unraveling. I've never seen him like this, paranoid, volatile, convinced everyone is conspiring against him. That's actually good for our case, Rachel explained. Erratic behavior suggests consciousness of guilt. If he starts destroying evidence or threatening witnesses, it strengthens our position significantly. He's already doing both, Sophia confirmed. Last night, he was shredding documents in his home office. And this morning he called David Foster, threatened to destroy his life if he testified against him. I exchanged glances with Rachel. This was developing faster than we'd anticipated. We need to get ahead of this, I decided. Contact Judge Wilson, request an emergency hearing about evidence preservation, and reach out to Foster, offer protection if he'll go on record about the document falsification during my divorce. What about me? Sophia asked. What should I do now? I considered her question carefully. Document everything. Every threat, every suspicious behavior. If you can do it safely, gather any remaining evidence from your home before Mason destroys it all. I paused, then added, and prepare for this to get uglier before it gets better. Mason won't surrender easily. Not his company, not his reputation, not the narrative he's built about himself. I know. Sophia's expression hardened with resolve. But neither will I. As she left for her sister's house, I found myself reflecting on the unlikely alliance that had formed between us. Two women who should have been enemies, united by the same man's betrayal. Mason had underestimated both of us, assumed we would play the roles he'd assigned, the bitter ex-wife, the decorative current wife. He hadn't counted on our strength, our intelligence, our determination to reclaim what was rightfully ours. His mistake. His downfall. Have you ever found strength in an unexpected alliance? Ever discovered that the person you thought was your competitor was actually your strongest ally? The most powerful connections often come from shared experience, especially the painful ones. Drop a comment below sharing your story of finding support in surprising places. The next morning, headlines across tech publications announced that Global Technologies had officially paused their acquisition of NeuroSync, pending resolution of intellectual property concerns. NeuroSync stock plummeted in pre-market trading, erasing nearly $1 billion in market value before the opening bell. Mason's public response was swift and defiant. A press statement dismissing my claims as opportunistic attempts to extract undeserved financial gain and expressing complete confidence that the acquisition would proceed once the baseless allegations were addressed. But behind the scenes, a different story was unfolding. Our motion for an emergency hearing on evidence preservation had been granted, scheduled for that afternoon, and David Foster had contacted Rachel, agreeing to provide sworn testimony about the document falsification during my divorce, in exchange for our help defending against the inevitable retaliation from Mason. He's running scared, Rachel observed as we prepared for the hearing. 3 former NeuroSync engineers have reached out, offering to testify about your role in developing the core technology. They say Mason has been calling them, alternating between threats and bribes to secure their silence. People are choosing sides, I noted, scanning the latest coverage on my tablet, and not necessarily the ones Mason expected. The emergency hearing was brief but productive. Judge Wilson, clearly troubled by reports of document destruction and witness intimidation, issued a comprehensive evidence preservation order and authorized expedited depositions of key witnesses, including David Foster and the NeuroSync engineers who had come forward. As we left the courtroom, I spotted Thomas Chin, the chairman of NeuroSync's board, waiting in the hallway. His presence was unexpected. Board chairs typically stayed far from the messy details of litigation, especially in its early stages. Miss Morgan, he approached with the measured dignity of someone accustomed to wielding power quietly. Might I have a word? Rachel and I exchanged glances. Of course, Mr. Chin. Though I should note that my attorney will need to be present for any substantive discussion. Understood. He gestured toward a nearby conference room. This won't take long. Once inside, Chin didn't waste time on pleasantries. The board is concerned about the direction of this litigation and its impact on the company's valuation. The Global Technologies deal represents significant value for our shareholders, value that is rapidly eroding, while these allegations remain unresolved. The allegations could be resolved quickly if Mr. Reed acknowledged the truth and made appropriate restitution. Rachel pointed out. Chin's expression remained neutral. Mr. Reed has assured the board that your claims are without merit and can be defeated in court. However, the litigation timeline is incompatible with our acquisition objectives. What are you suggesting, Mr. Chin? I asked directly. The board would be willing to facilitate a settlement that recognizes your contributions to NeuroSync's early development. Financial compensation, public acknowledgement as a contributor, perhaps an advisory role moving forward. Contributor? I repeated, incredulous. I wasn't a contributor, Mr. Chin. I was the primary inventor of NeuroSync's core technology. Mason Reed stole my work and erased my name from its history. These are allegations that we can prove, Rachel interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. This is a small sample of the evidence we've gathered. Documentation of Miss Morgan's role as primary inventor, proof of subsequent falsification, and testimony from multiple witnesses confirming deliberate fraud. Chen scanned the documents, his composed demeanor slipping slightly as he processed their implications. When he looked up, his expression had hardened. Have you presented this evidence to Mr. Reed? Some of it. He's aware of our case. Chen closed the folder. I see. And your settlement terms would be? Full recognition as NeuroSync's primary inventor and co-founder, restoration of my name to all patents and company materials, compensation equal to half the value of the Global Technologies acquisition, and Mason Reed's resignation as CEO. The last demand was new, something Rachel and I had discussed but not formally included in our legal strategy until now. Chen's eyes widened slightly. That is, substantial. It's proportionate to what was taken from me. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze directly. Mr. Chin, I don't want to destroy NeuroSync. It's my creation, and I'm proud of what it's become. But I won't settle for token recognition or partial compensation. Not anymore. The board cannot force Mr. Reed to resign. He maintains significant ownership and founders' rights. Then you have a problem, Rachel observed. Because Global Technologies won't proceed with the acquisition while these intellectual property issues remain unresolved. And they won't be resolved as long as Mason Reed continues denying Miss Morgan's role. Chen was silent for a long moment, calculation evident in his eyes. I'll need to discuss this with the board. Perhaps there's a path forward that addresses everyone's concerns. We're open to constructive dialogue, I assured him, but not to compromise on the fundamental truth. NeuroSync was my creation. Any resolution must start with that acknowledgement. After Chen left, Rachel turned to me with a raised eyebrow. Mason's resignation? That's a new demand. It felt right in the moment. I shrugged. Besides, do you really think Global would want him remaining as CEO after all this comes out? Probably not, but it raises the stakes considerably. Mason's identity is completely wrapped up in being NeuroSync's visionary leader. Forcing him out would be like cutting off a limb. Then he shouldn't have built his identity on stolen achievements, I replied, gathering my materials. What's next on our agenda? Foster's deposition this afternoon. Then the NeuroSync engineers tomorrow morning. Rachel checked her watch. We should head back to the office to prepare. As we walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, NeuroSync board called emergency meeting. Mason furious. Something big happening. I showed the message to Rachel. Looks like Chen's wasting no time consulting the board. Good. The more pressure Mason feels from all sides, the more likely he is to crack. David Foster's deposition was scheduled for 3 p.m. at our law offices. We had arranged security at the entrance, a precaution that proved wise when Mason attempted to enter the building unannounced, claiming he had every right to be present for testimony concerning him. Actually, Mr. Reed, you don't, the security officer explained, showing him the court order limiting attendance to specified attorneys and the deposition subject. I'll have to ask you to leave the premises. Mason's frustration was visible even on the grainy security monitor in our conference room. This is absurd. Foster is discussing matters covered by attorney-client privilege. I have a right to defend my interests. The court has already ruled on the crime-fraud exception to privilege, the officer replied calmly. If you have concerns, please have your attorney address them through proper channels. After Mason finally departed, Foster arrived, looking nervous but resolute. His testimony over the next 3 hours was devastating to Mason's case. He detailed specific instances of document falsification during my divorce, including the fabrication of emails purporting to show I had acknowledged Mason as NeuroSync's primary creator. Mr. Reed directed me to find a solution to Miss Morgan's claim of being NeuroSync's inventor, Foster testified. When I suggested we might need to negotiate a fair settlement, acknowledging her contribution, he became angry. He said, and I quote, "I didn't build this company to share credit with my ex-wife. Find another way." And what was that other way? Rachel asked. Foster's discomfort was evident. I instructed our tech team to create backdated emails appearing to come from Miss Morgan's account, acknowledging Mr. Reed as the primary inventor and herself as merely a supporting contributor. Did Mr. Reed know these emails were fabricated? Yes. He reviewed and approved the final versions before they were submitted during discovery. And did you understand at the time that this constituted fraud on the court? Foster looked down, shame evident in his posture. Yes, I did. Why did you participate in this fraud, Mr. Foster? Professional ambition, fear of losing an important client, moral cowardice. He met my eyes briefly, none of which excused what I did to Miss Morgan. By the time Foster's deposition concluded, we had on-record testimony from Mason's former lead counsel confirming deliberate fraud during my divorce proceedings, fraud specifically designed to strip me of credit for creating NeuroSync. That's going to be difficult for Mason to explain away, Rachel observed as we reviewed the transcript. Especially since Foster preserved emails documenting Mason's instructions regarding the fabricated evidence. Mason will claim Foster is lying to save himself, I pointed out. That he's the one who orchestrated the fraud without Mason's knowledge, which is why tomorrow's depositions from the engineers are so important. They provide independent corroboration of your role as primary inventor. My phone buzzed with another text from Sophia. Board meeting lasted 4 hours. No official statement yet, but rumors of major leadership changes being discussed. Mason locked himself in his office afterward, refusing all calls. I shared the update with Rachel. The walls are closing in. Good. The more pressure from all sides, the more likely he is to make a critical mistake. That mistake came sooner than we expected. At 11 p.m., my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was immediately familiar, though distorted by emotion. "I know what you're doing, Abby." Mason's words were slightly slurred, suggesting he'd been drinking. "Turning everyone against me, my board, my wife, my legal team. Even the goddamn engineers who wouldn't have jobs without me. Mason, you're drunk. This call is inappropriate." Inappropriate? He laughed bitterly. You want to talk about inappropriate? How about secretly recording company materials for years, then using them to sabotage a $5 billion acquisition? I frowned, confused by this accusation. I never recorded anything. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent. The backup server. The one you set up in 2015 that mirrored all our development logs. The one you kept secret as your insurance policy. My mind raced. The backup server had been my idea, a redundancy measure after a system crash nearly wiped out 6 months of research, but it hadn't been secret. The entire development team knew about it, and I certainly hadn't maintained access to it after leaving the company. Mason, that server was standard backup protocol, not some secret insurance policy. The whole team knew about it. Then, how do you explain the access logs? Someone with your credentials has been downloading files as recently as last month. That stopped me cold. That's impossible. I haven't had valid credentials since the divorce. Tell that to the system logs. Someone's been accessing those backups using authentication linked to your old accounts. I was genuinely baffled. I don't know what you're talking about, Mason, but whatever is happening, it isn't me. Save it for court. His voice hardened. I've got the evidence now. Tomorrow, I'm filing a countersuit for corporate espionage. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you can get a job teaching community college, let alone practice law. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion and growing alarm. I immediately called Rachel, explaining Mason's strange accusations. This makes no sense. She agreed after hearing the details. You haven't had access to NeuroSync systems for years. And even if someone were using old credentials linked to you, why would Mason immediately assume it was you rather than a security breach? Because he's desperate and looking for any way to discredit me. I paced my living room, thinking through the implications. But I'm concerned about what he thinks he's found. If someone has been accessing those backup servers, who and why? We need to get ahead of this. First thing tomorrow, we file a preemptive motion addressing these allegations. Then, we accelerate the engineer depositions. Their testimony will be crucial in establishing your legitimate role before Mason can spin this new narrative. I agreed with Rachel's strategy, but sleep eluded me that night. Mason's accusation was bizarre but specific. Someone had been accessing NeuroSync's backup servers using credentials somehow linked to my old accounts. But who? And what were they looking for? The answer came at 6 a.m., in the form of another unexpected call. Abby, it's Sophia. I need to see you immediately. It's about the backup server. 30 minutes later, we met at an all-night diner near the Bay Bridge. Sophia looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept at all. She carried a laptop bag that she kept close, one hand protectively on the strap. I'm the one who's been accessing the backup server, she said without preamble. I used an old administrator account Mason had forgotten about, but the system still logs it under the original creator's credentials. Yours. Why? I asked, bewildered. What were you looking for? Originally. Evidence of what Mason did to you. Sophia opened her laptop, turning it so I could see the screen. But I found something much bigger. Something that explains why Mason is so desperate to complete the global technologies deal before anyone looks too closely at NeuroSync's recent research. She pulled up a series of technical documents, research logs, development notes, testing protocols. At first glance, they appeared to be standard NeuroSync research materials, focused on refining the neural interface technology. I don't understand, I admitted. What am I looking at? Neural pattern manipulation protocols. Sophia's voice was tense. Mason's been secretly developing capability to not just read thought patterns, but influence them. Subtle emotional manipulation at first, creating feelings of trust, satisfaction, desire. But the latest tests go further, suggesting potential for actual thought implantation. The implications hit me like a physical blow. That's not what NeuroSync was designed for. The ethical protocols specifically prohibited manipulation of neural patterns. Protocols you designed. Sophia nodded grimly. Protocols Mason has been systematically dismantling over the past year, ever since the global acquisition talks began. Does Global know about this research? I don't think so. It's been compartmentalized, restricted to a small team working directly under Mason. The acquisition due diligence focused on the commercial technology, not these experimental applications. I stared at the documents, horrified by the potential misuse of my creation. NeuroSync had been designed to help people, to give voice to those who couldn't speak, to provide control to those with physical limitations, to enhance human capability through natural neural interfaces. The idea that it was being perverted into a tool for manipulating thoughts was abhorrent. We need to take this to the board immediately, I decided. And to Global Technologies. They need to know what they're really acquiring. Mason will deny everything. Say the research is theoretical, not intended for implementation. Or claim it's been taken out of context. Not if we have testimony from the researchers involved. I pulled out my phone. Rachel needs to see this right away. We may need to modify our strategy completely. The revelations about Mason's secret research changed everything. What had begun as a personal fight to reclaim my intellectual property had transformed into something far more significant, a battle over the ethical application of technology, with profound implications for human autonomy and privacy. By 9 a.m., we had convened an emergency meeting with our legal team, including 2 additional attorneys specializing in technology, ethics, and regulatory compliance. After reviewing Sophia's evidence, the consensus was clear. We needed to alert both NeuroSync's board and appropriate regulatory agencies immediately. This goes beyond intellectual property disputes, explained Marissa Wong, our new ethics specialist. If NeuroSync is developing technology capable of neural manipulation without proper oversight or ethical constraints, it potentially violates multiple federal regulations and international accords on human experimentation. Mason will claim it's all theoretical research, Rachel pointed out, that they're exploring capabilities without intending to implement them commercially. The testing logs suggest otherwise, Sophia countered, highlighting specific documents. These are results from actual human trials, not theoretical models. They've moved beyond simulation into practical application. The revelation stunned the room into momentary silence. Human testing of neural manipulation technology, without regulatory approval or ethical review, wasn't just unethical, it was potentially criminal. Who are the test subjects? I asked, my voice tight with growing horror. The logs don't specify, Sophia admitted. But based on the data parameters, they appear to be NeuroSync employees, likely the same small team working on the project. We need to move quickly, Rachel decided. File our amended complaint including these new allegations. Alert the board and regulatory authorities simultaneously. And reach out to Global Technologies directly. They have a right to know what they're potentially acquiring. As the team mobilized to implement this new strategy, I found myself staring at the NeuroSync logo on one of the documents, the stylized neural network I had designed during those early, hopeful days of our startup. How had something created to help people been twisted into a tool for potential manipulation and control? The answer, of course, was Mason. His ambition unchecked by ethical constraints, his pursuit of power and wealth overriding any consideration of right and wrong. He had stolen my creation once by erasing my name from its history. Now he was stealing its soul by perverting its purpose. That couldn't stand, not just for my sake, but for everyone who might be affected by this technology in the future. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Our amended complaint was filed with the court, including the new allegations about unethical research. Formal letters were sent to NeuroSync's board and the appropriate regulatory agencies. And Rachel personally called Global Technologies to request an emergency meeting with their acquisition team. At 2 p.m., my phone rang with a call from Thomas Chin. Miss Morgan, his normally composed voice sounded strained. I've just been briefed on your amended complaint and the concerning research materials you've provided. The board has called an emergency session for 4 p.m. today. We would like you to attend. In what capacity? As the original creator of NeuroSync technology, the board needs to understand the ethical frameworks you established and how significantly the current research deviates from them. Will Mason be there? Yes. As CEO, he has the right to address these allegations directly. But I want to assure you that the board is taking this matter with the utmost seriousness. I agreed to attend, then immediately called Sophia to update her. The board wants me at their emergency meeting this afternoon. That's significant. They rarely involve outsiders in crisis sessions. Her voice lowered. Mason just called an all-hands meeting with his executive team. Sources tell me he's furious, demanding to know who leaked the research materials. Be careful, Sophia. If he suspects you, he already does. But he can't prove anything yet, she paused. I'm securing additional evidence from the company servers, materials that corroborate your role as NeuroSync's creator and document Mason's systematic erasure of your contribution. Isn't that dangerous? If you're caught accessing those files now, it's worth the risk. The more evidence we have, the harder it will be for Mason to spin this as just your word against his. Her courage was remarkable. Despite the personal and professional risks, Sophia was putting everything on the line to expose the truth, not just about my role in creating NeuroSync, but about the dangerous direction Mason was taking the technology. Thank you, I said simply, for everything you're doing. I know the cost could be high. The cost of staying silent would be higher. Her voice was resolute. Mason Reed doesn't get to steal your legacy and pervert your creation. Not if I can help stop him. The NeuroSync headquarters occupied a gleaming modern building in San Francisco's tech corridor. As I approached the entrance for the first time since my divorce, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, nostalgia for the early days when Mason and I had dreamed of changing the world, anger at how thoroughly he had erased me from the company's history, and determination to reclaim both my legacy and the ethical foundation of my creation. Thomas Chin met me in the lobby, his expression grave as he escorted me to the boardroom on the top floor. "The situation is tense," he advised quietly. "Mason is insisting this is all a coordinated attack designed to sabotage the global acquisition. He's demanding the board back him unconditionally." "And what's the board's position?" "Divided. Some directors want to proceed with the acquisition regardless, believing any issues can be addressed later. Others are deeply concerned about both the ethical implications and the potential legal and regulatory consequences." As we entered the boardroom, all conversation ceased. 12 people sat around the massive table, the full board of directors, plus Mason at the head, his posture radiating defiance. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, rising halfway from his chair. "This is an internal corporate matter." The board invited Dr. Morgan, as the original creator of NeuroSync technology, Chen replied calmly, using my academic title deliberately. "Her insight into the ethical frameworks established during initial development is directly relevant to our discussion." "This is absurd. She's suing the company. Her presence is inappropriate and potentially compromises privileged discussions." "Actually," interjected an older woman I recognized as the board's lead independent director, "the legal department has advised that Dr. Morgan's presence is appropriate given the nature of our inquiry. She is not here as a litigant, but as a technical expert on NeuroSync's foundational principles." Mason looked around the table, clearly searching for allies, but found none. With visible reluctance, he sat back down. Chen guided me to an empty seat across from Mason. "For those who haven't had the opportunity to meet her, this is Dr. Abigail Morgan, the original developer of NeuroSync's core neural interface algorithm and co-founder of the company." The introduction, acknowledging my role so directly, sent a ripple around the table. Several directors nodded in greeting, while others studied me with newfound interest. "We have convened this emergency session," Chen continued, "to address serious allegations regarding both the historical record of NeuroSync's development and current research directions that may violate ethical guidelines and regulatory requirements." For the next hour, the board methodically reviewed the evidence, my role in creating the technology, Mason's systematic erasure of that role, and most disturbingly, the recent research into neural pattern manipulation. Throughout the presentation, Mason grew increasingly agitated, interrupting with denials, technical objections, and accusations of corporate espionage. But the evidence was overwhelming, particularly after Chen revealed that the board had independently verified key documents through NeuroSync's own servers. "These allegations are being deliberately misrepresented," Mason insisted, his composure fraying. "The neural response research is entirely theoretical, a standard exploration of capability boundaries that any responsible technology company would pursue. The testing logs indicate human trials," Mr. Reed countered a director with a medical background. "Trials conducted without proper ethical review or regulatory approval. Controlled experiments with fully informed volunteers," Mason dismissed. "Internal research that poses no risk and creates no products. That directly contradicts your presentation to the executive committee last month," the director replied, "where you outlined commercialization pathways for what you called neural influence capabilities. Or was that also theoretical?" Mason's face flushed as he realized the board had more information than he'd anticipated. "Those were speculative projections, not confirmed development plans." "Mr. Reed," Chen interrupted, his voice firm but controlled, "the board's concern is not just with the research itself, but with the pattern of misrepresentation. You've consistently presented NeuroSync as your creation, despite substantial evidence that Dr. Morgan was the primary inventor. You've pursued research directions that violate the ethical frameworks established during the company's founding, and you've withheld crucial information from both this board and our acquisition partners at Global Technologies. This is a coordinated attack," Mason insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Abby has orchestrated this entire situation to extract revenge and financial gain. She's manipulated evidence, turned my wife against me, even corrupted members of my executive team. That's quite an elaborate conspiracy theory," I observed, speaking for the first time. "Far simpler explanation. I created NeuroSync. You stole it, and now you're perverting its purpose." Mason turned to me, his expression a mixture of fury and desperation. You couldn't have built NeuroSync without me. The funding, the team, the business strategy, all me. Your algorithm would have remained an academic curiosity without my vision. Perhaps, I acknowledged. We'll never know, since you denied me the opportunity to prove otherwise. But that doesn't justify erasing me from the company's history or abandoning the ethical principles that were foundational to the technology. Ethical principles, he scoffed. The technology goes where the technology goes. Progress doesn't wait for academic hand-wringing about hypothetical misuse. And that, I said quietly, is exactly why you shouldn't be leading this company anymore. A heavy silence fell over the room. Mason looked around at the board members, suddenly aware of how his words had landed. In his desperation to defend himself, he had essentially confirmed his willingness to ignore ethical considerations in pursuit of technological advancement, precisely the concern at the heart of the board's emergency session. Chin cleared his throat. In light of this discussion, I believe the board needs to deliberate on appropriate next steps. Dr. Morgan, thank you for your insights. We may have additional questions later. As I rose to leave, Mason stood as well. This isn't over, he said, his voice low but intense. You may have turned them against me temporarily, but I built this company. It exists because of me. They can't just push me out. Actually, Mason, they can, and they should. I met his gaze steadily. NeuroSync deserves leadership that honors its original purpose, helping people, not manipulating them. You self-righteous. Mr. Reed, Chen interrupted sharply. That's enough. Please remain for the board's deliberation. I left the boardroom with Mason's glare following me, but for the first time in years, I felt truly empowered in his presence rather than diminished. The truth was finally emerging, not just about my role in creating NeuroSync, but about the man who had stolen it from me. Rachel was waiting in a nearby conference room, eager for an update. How did it go? Better than expected. The board seems genuinely concerned about both my erasure from the company's history and Mason's ethical violations. I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. But it's far from over. Mason will fight with everything he has. Let him. The more he struggles, the deeper he sinks. Rachel checked her phone. Global Technologies has agreed to meet with us tomorrow morning. They're putting the acquisition on indefinite hold, pending resolution of these issues. Good. They need to understand what they're potentially acquiring, not just the technology, but the ethical implications. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mason's executive team is falling apart. 3 VPs just resigned in protest over the neural manipulation research. 2 others are cooperating with the board's investigation. I showed Rachel the message. The house of cards is collapsing, and not a moment too soon. The tech press is starting to pick up on rumors about ethical concerns at NeuroSync. By tomorrow, this will be mainstream news. 2 hours later, Thomas Chin found us still waiting. His expression was somber but resolute. The board has reached several decisions, he announced. First, we're suspending all research related to neural pattern manipulation, pending comprehensive ethical review and regulatory consultation. Second, we're establishing an independent committee to investigate the historical record regarding NeuroSync's development and Dr. Morgan's role. And Mason? I asked. Mr. Reed has been placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending the outcome of these investigations. The board has appointed me as interim CEO. Relief flooded through me. That's significant. It's necessary, Chen replied simply. The evidence you provided, combined with internal materials we've subsequently reviewed, raised concerns too serious to ignore. NeuroSync's future depends on restoring both ethical governance and accurate recognition of its origins. Will the global acquisition proceed? That remains to be determined. We've advised Global of our actions and the ongoing investigations. They're reassessing their position. Chen's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Dr. Morgan, I believe you've done this company a service. Difficult as these revelations are, NeuroSync needed course correction before irreparable harm was done. After Chen left, Rachel and I sat in silence for a moment, processing the significance of these developments. Mason's been suspended, I said finally, the reality sinking in. After 3 years of building his empire on my work, he's finally facing consequences. It's just the beginning, Rachel cautioned. He still owns significant company shares. He'll fight the board's decisions, possibly through litigation. And he'll certainly continue fighting your claims. Let him fight. The truth is on my side. The truth did indeed prove powerful in the days that followed. NeuroSync's independent investigation confirmed my role as the primary inventor of the core technology. Global Technologies revised their acquisition offer, reduced in value but structured to proceed once appropriate ethical governance was established and proper credit for the technology's origins was restored. Mason, predictably, fought back. He filed lawsuits against the board, against me, against Sophia, even against David Foster. He gave inflammatory interviews claiming conspiracy and character assassination. But with each desperate counterattack, he further damaged his own credibility and confirmed the pattern of behavior I had alleged. The turning point came 3 weeks after the board suspended him, when the neurological researchers involved in the manipulation studies came forward. They confirmed that Mason had personally directed the shift toward influence capabilities, overriding their ethical concerns and instructing them to keep the research compartmentalized from the rest of the company. He told us the future of NeuroSync wasn't in assistive technology but in thought leadership, literal control of how people think and respond, one researcher testified. When we raised ethical concerns, he said, ethics are for people who lack vision. That testimony, combined with the mounting evidence of intellectual property theft, finally broke Mason's resistance. Facing potential criminal charges related to unauthorized human experimentation, permanent damage to his reputation, and the likelihood of losing everything in protracted litigation, he agreed to settlement negotiations. The terms we eventually reached were comprehensive: full recognition of my role as NeuroSync's primary inventor and co-founder, restoration of my name to all patents, company materials, and historical records, financial compensation equal to 40% of the revised global acquisition value, nearly $2 billion, and Mason's permanent resignation from NeuroSync, with restrictions on his future involvement in neural interface technology. In exchange, the criminal allegations would not be pursued, allowing Mason to avoid potential jail time. It was more mercy than he deserved, but I agreed for the sake of closure and NeuroSync's future. The settlement was announced at a joint press conference with Thomas Chin, where I was publicly acknowledged as NeuroSync's creator for the first time. The technology press covered it extensively, with headlines like "Justice for NeuroSync's Forgotten Founder" and "Tech's Hidden Figure Finally Recognized." Mason did not attend. According to industry rumors, he had already left the country for an extended sabbatical at a private estate in the Swiss Alps, away from the media scrutiny and professional ostracism that had followed the revelations about his conduct. Sophia filed for divorce the day after the settlement was announced. I want nothing from him, she told me over coffee a week later. Just my freedom and the right to develop my fashion interface technology independently. You could claim a significant portion of his remaining assets, I pointed out. After what he did to you. I have my own resources, she replied with quiet dignity. And unlike Mason, I don't need to take what isn't mine to feel successful. Her integrity impressed me yet again. This woman who had once seemed like my replacement, my rival, had become something unexpected, an ally, perhaps even a friend. What will you do now? I asked her. Launch my fashion tech company properly. Continue developing the neural interface for creative applications. She smiled. With proper credit to NeuroSync's original creator, of course. I'd like to see your work sometime. Perhaps there are collaboration opportunities. I'd like that. She hesitated, then added, you know, Mason told me you were brilliant but unstable, that you couldn't handle the pressure of innovation at scale. Another lie in his collection. He told me you were just a trophy wife with no substance. I admitted. I believed it for too long. He underestimated both of us. His biggest mistake among many. 6 months later, the Global Technologies acquisition of NeuroSync was finally completed, with appropriate recognition of my founding role and strict ethical oversight provisions for future research. I declined an offer to join the company's leadership, preferring to establish the Morgan Foundation for Ethical Innovation with a significant portion of my settlement funds. The foundation's mission was twofold: supporting women in technology through scholarships and mentorship, and promoting ethical frameworks for emerging technologies with potential human impact. It felt right. Using the proceeds of reclaiming my legacy to help others protect theirs. Rachel and I continued our legal practice, now with an expanded focus on intellectual property protection and ethics in technology. Our firm's reputation for successfully challenging powerful interests brought a steady stream of clients, innovators who feared their contributions might be erased, their work appropriated without proper credit or compensation. And occasionally, I would receive messages from young women in tech who had followed my story, who found inspiration in my refusal to remain erased from history. Their gratitude was humbling, a reminder that standing up for yourself can inadvertently create space for others to do the same. One crisp autumn evening, I was working late in my office when a notification appeared on my computer, an article from TechCrunch with the headline "Former NeuroSync CEO Mason Reed launches new venture in Singapore." According to the report, Mason had emerged from his self-imposed exile to announce a new company focused on anticipatory computing, technology that would predict and respond to user needs before they were consciously expressed. No mention of neural interfaces or thought pattern analysis, but the underlying concept was adjacent enough to raise my concerns. Had he learned nothing from his fall? Was he simply taking his ambitions to a jurisdiction with fewer regulatory constraints? My phone rang as I was contemplating these questions. The caller ID displayed an international number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Abby." Mason's voice was instantly recognizable, despite the distance. "I see you found the article about my new company. How did you? You still use the same TechCrunch alert settings we set up years ago. They send email notifications when certain keywords appear." A pause. "I expected you'd be monitoring news about me." I frowned, unsettled by this reminder of how well he knew my habits. "What do you want, Mason?" "To clear the air. To let you know my new venture isn't what you might fear. No neural interfaces, no thought manipulation. Just predictive algorithms based on behavioral patterns. Why would I believe you? Your track record with ethical boundaries isn't exactly stellar." He was quiet for a moment. "I deserve that. And more." Another pause. "The past 6 months have given me time to reflect on what I did to you, on what I almost did with the technology we created. That I created, I corrected automatically. That you created, he acknowledged, surprising me. The settlement may have required that public admission, but privately, I want you to know I mean it. NeuroSync was your vision, your breakthrough. I just saw its potential and became obsessed with controlling it. I wasn't sure how to respond to this unexpected contrition. Is this an apology tour? Seeking forgiveness before launching your next venture? Not seeking forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable." His voice had lost the confident polish I remembered, replaced by something more subdued, more genuine. "But seeking, I don't know, understanding, perhaps. Or at least a chance to acknowledge the truth without legal requirements forcing my hand. The truth," I repeated, "which is that I loved you. That I was afraid of being overshadowed by your brilliance. That I convinced myself erasing your contribution was justified because I was the one making NeuroSync commercially successful." He sighed. "That I became someone I never thought I'd be. Someone who valued ambition over integrity, recognition over truth." The admission was startling in its frankness. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I had once loved, capable of insight, of honesty, of facing hard truths about himself. "Why tell me this now, Mason? What do you want from me?" "Nothing. That's the point. I have no agenda, no angle. Just a recognition that I need to acknowledge what I did wrong before I can move forward with any integrity." I considered his words carefully, searching for manipulation or hidden motives. But perhaps the most surprising thing was that I believed him, not completely, perhaps, but enough to recognize genuine reflection. "I hope your new venture reflects this perspective," I said finally. "That you've truly learned from what happened." "I'm trying." The company charter includes strict ethical provisions and distributed oversight. No single person, especially not me, has unilateral control over development directions. Smart safeguards. Learn from my mistakes, the hard way. He paused. "I saw the announcement about your foundation. The ethical innovation focus is fitting, important work. It feels right. Using what I've reclaimed to help protect others from similar experiences." Another silence stretched between us, not comfortable, but not entirely hostile either. Just two people acknowledging the complex history that connected them. "I should let you go," Mason said finally. "I just wanted you to hear from me directly, before your imagination filled in worst-case scenarios about what I might be doing next. I appreciate that. And strangely, I did. Good luck with your new venture, Mason. I hope it reflects better choices than your last one." "It will. It has to." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Be well, Abby." After he hung up, I sat for a long time staring at my phone, processing the unexpected conversation. Not forgiveness. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal too fundamental for that. But perhaps a kind of closure, an acknowledgement that even someone who had caused such harm could potentially learn, reflect, grow. My computer chimed with a new email, Sophia, sending preliminary designs for her neural fashion interface and suggesting a coffee meeting to discuss potential collaboration with my foundation. Life moving forward, new connections forming, opportunities emerging from the ashes of what had been destroyed. I had lost 3 years of proper recognition for my work. I had weathered public humiliation, gaslighting, theft of my intellectual property, and systematic erasure from my own creation's history. But in fighting to reclaim my legacy, I had found something perhaps more valuable: my voice, my power, my determination to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to others without consequence. The prenuptial agreement that Mason had drafted but never shown me, the document that had revealed his premeditated plan to claim my innovations as his own, now hung framed in my office. Not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a testament to the importance of knowing your worth and fighting for proper recognition. Some might see it as dwelling on the past. I saw it differently. It was a reminder that no legal document, no powerful adversary, no systematic erasure can ultimately silence the truth. That justice, while sometimes delayed, is worth pursuing, not just for personal vindication, but for establishing that consequences exist when powerful people attempt to claim others' achievements as their own. The most valuable agreement, I had learned, wasn't the one on paper. It was the one you made with yourself, to never accept erasure, to stand firm in your truth, and to use whatever platform you gained to ensure others could do the same. That was a contract worth honoring, today and always. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about claiming your power and standing in your truth. Have you ever had to fight to be recognized for your contributions? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to stand up for themselves too. Remember, the most powerful form of reclamation isn't just getting credit for your work, it's using that recognition to create space for others to be seen and valued too. That's how we change not just individual stories, but the entire narrative around who creates, who contributes, and who deserves to be remembered.